Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are joined by Kerry Tice, CircuSoul Yoga, and there's a skeleton behind you, which I love. I don't know if that's decoration or that's your wall now. What is that?
I thought we've all got some skeletons in our closet, so I decided I'd just go ahead and put mine on the wall today.
You are brilliant. Please say hello, introduce yourself and company to our listeners today, Kerry.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm Kerry Tice, and I'm from Sarasota, Florida. I own and direct CircuSoul Yoga here, which is a full functioning yoga studio. We do aerial yoga, we do hot yoga, and everything in between, including yoga retreats and yoga teacher training. So we got lots of things to talk about.
We do. And just to point out the website off the top, if you don't mind.
Yes, our website is CircuSoul.com, CircuSoul.com. And you can register for your classes. You can check out really just so much information about what we do and what we offer. And we're always available to chat with you as well. Facebook or through our website, you can send us a message. You can always give us a call at 941-922-9642.
Great. Let's start off today by discussing a little bit about yoga in general. And I hear yin yoga, Y-I-N. What is yin yoga exactly?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this last week, but I really have so much to talk about. This is a topic of conversation that in a training setting, we would actually spend about 20 hours in a weekend between the practice and the discussion. But truly, this is something you can have ongoing study and ongoing practice really forever. I've taken almost 100 hours in this type of style. And I just find it so beneficial to my own body and my mental health that it was something that I had to have here. It was something that was so powerful for me that I needed to be able to really just share it. So it's something that we have integrated at our studio as something that happens every day. Really, we have a class in this either in the morning or in the evening every single day of the week. So we're really gonna give this offering something that people can really come to.
Great. Now, as far as yin yoga being functional versus aesthetic, correct? What can you explain that?
Yeah. So every single pose, and we kind of showed some of the poses last week, kind of going to do something a little different this week. But each of the poses actually has an objective. It actually has a particular part of the body that it's trying to target. So when we get into the practice, it's very, very functional in the way that everything has a reason, has a kind of a reason why we do it. So we get into these different postures to really affect the different parts of the body, whether it be the hamstrings or it's the outside of the hip, the IT band, or perhaps also we get into the chest and we get into the shoulders in the practice as well.
Wow. All right, good. So what about myofascia or myofascia? Is that how I pronounce it correctly?
Myofascia. So fascia or myofascia, as we're going to be talking about it today, is actually this connective tissue that surrounds every single organ of your body. It also wraps up your bones, and it also wraps up all your muscles. So it's something that is actually probably the most important tissue that you have. When we are first conceived, right? Before we actually kind of form an embryo, the first few cells that are formed from that that beginning are actually, it's a flap of fascia. And that's actually what connects the womb into the uterus. And this fascia actually lays down your entire network. So the fascia actually gets laid down first, and then all of the other things come in. So it's very similar in kind of like a building where we put scaffolding up so that we have some sort of support structure so that we can build. Well, this stuff actually stays. So we build a scaffolding, and that actually becomes what we call the organ of form. So the fascia, it's actually my favorite way of talking about it, is that it is this organ of form. And it's so important. You've maybe seen in the more recent Olympics, especially in swimming, where they change the kind of suits they wear. It was kind of a big deal, like kind of maybe a couple Olympics ago, where they started wearing these compression suits, the swimsuits, and these compression suits actually function just like the fascia, and it actually creates a compression. And through that, we're able to actually work more efficiently. And that's really what it's all about, is that it's a organ to keep you together. Because if your muscles weren't organized the way they were, we wouldn't really be able to do anything, right? We wouldn't be able to get up and walk away or kind
what's
of move our
holding it?
arms
What's
around.
connecting it? Okay.
Yeah,
And what
we've got to
about
have something
muscles
kind of pulling it all together.
and
Otherwise,
tendons?
everything just goes haywire.
Now, is that holding together the muscles and the tendons? What's the difference with those? Could you explain now how the fascia comes into play with those?
Absolutely. So the fascia is actually, we love to talk about it because we need models in our life to understand how things are. So we create these models, but in reality, a lot of times the model isn't really the way that it is, right? It's this concept that we create so that our kind of limited minds can understand this really big concept. So in anatomy and in so many books, we see the tendon versus the bone versus the muscle as these kind of separate structures. But what I want to share with you today is that we actually we have this ability to kind of understand this stuff in a different way.
Sure.
So I've actually got an image of a muscle fiber. So we've got an actual muscle here. It's a nice little drawing and illustration. But this illustration was so powerful to me in understanding what fascia really is and why would kind of really why would really matter is if you start to look at what the kind of functional unit of a muscle right here at the very top, it's called a myofibril. And that's really just a fancy word for muscle fiber, right? Or a muscle cell. And so each of these, they come together. Just one of them isn't very powerful. So they actually put, say, maybe a dozen or 2 dozen together, and they all run parallel with each other. They're right next to each other. You might know that in our biceps, right? They all run in that area. You're like, oh, where's my bicep?
Yeah, not like yours. Okay.
Those muscles run through there and those muscle fibers. But what we oftentimes don't know is that when these muscle fibers come together, the outside wrapping is actually fascia. So what keeps that, say, dozen or 2 dozen myofibrils together is actually a thin layer of fascia on the outside of that functional unit. Wow. And so now if we take that functional unit, right, which is blown up here, and we start to put it into like the bigger part of the muscle, you'll see that that's only one piece, right? That unit, that 12 or 24 fibers or so is one of maybe 4 or 5 units that work together as a group to make stuff happen, right? So if I want to pull my arm in, we got to have several bundles work together. Otherwise, just like I said, it would be this disorganized mess. So your fascia wraps up the functional units, and then it takes those other functional units and it wraps them up again. And guess what they wrap up again in, which is the myofascia. More fascia. The answer is always fascia. So I could just I really get excited about this stuff that we kind of dive deeper into, but then it helps you really understand your body in a way that so many people don't. And a lot of people have never been exposed to this type of information. Yeah. So now we've got these, say 4 functional units that come together, and they're wrapped up in, of course, the fascia, the myofascia. And then if we put all those functional units together, now we actually get, say, an actual muscle. So maybe this is the hamstring in the thigh, or maybe this is the bicep in the arm. Okay. But we have that all together. And when they all come together, guess what they're wrapped up in, right? More fascia.
And I want to make a song now that,
And so they're all wrapped up in fascia. The smaller units are wrapped up in fascia. And what's really cool about it is that this fascia actually comes together. And as less muscle is in the fiber, as you can see, as this kind of muscle becomes thinner, right? At the body of the muscle, you'll see it kind of thicken. And as it comes to the end, it always gets smaller, okay? And as that comes to become smaller, because there's no muscle fiber in it anymore, the fibers that wrapped up your fascia previously now all come together and they form the tendon.
Ah.
So the tendon isn't this separate unit or separate piece. It's actually part of the whole thing. It's actually part of the muscle.
I never knew that. It's so good
Never
to
knew
see
that,
it and
right?
to break it down, Kerry. Thank you.
It
Yeah.
really helps to be able to see that, because it's like, I'm sure we've all heard of our tendons before, because these are things that we can injure when we practice or when we have a traumatic injury. And so these tendons actually, what's so cool is that the tendon actually then becomes the periosteum. Okay. And that might be a word you've not heard before, but that's the fascia that wraps the bone. Every bone has a little wrapping around it, and every muscle has a wrapping around it. And when those two interdigitate, when they come together, the tendon comes in and actually becomes the bone. So there's no separation of these units like we so often see in a textbook or in a model, or kind of the way we've put it in our brain, that one thing actually becomes the next thing, which becomes the next thing. And so we understand that if you pluck a string anywhere, it affects you everywhere. So if you stretch out your hamstrings, you're going to benefit your shoulder.
Okay.
And if you stretch out your chest, right, you're going to benefit your glute, right?
Yep.
There's no way of not kind of affecting the entire network. And kind of that's the fascia.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm loving what we learned today. What else did you have for us, Kerry? This is great.
So that's like kind of that idea that one structure becomes the next, and that really we're made up of this fascia, and this the fascia, it's really quite beautiful. Actually, I want to show you here in just a moment a video of the fascia. And so this is not from a cadaver, right? Which is so often the way you sometimes see this. This is actually in vivo, right? This is in a live tissue. So we actually can see what this tissue cells look like in real life, right? Ooh. And up until pretty recently, we couldn't do this, right? We didn't have technology. We didn't have a camera small enough. But nowadays, we have a camera small enough, right? If it can go in your nose, they can also go inside of, this is actually going to be in a forearm. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again with you, so that we can see what we call the myofascia magnified, right? So we're magnified at 25 times, right? So it is quite magnified. And you can see that it actually looks kind of similar to maybe a spider web, right?
Yeah.
Or a cobweb, but prettier, right? And it actually is fiber optic. So when you see it, it actually reflects light. And so what you see here is actually like maybe 2 or 3 pieces of fascia coming together, and they create these bigger branches. And really what we want are to have these smaller forms here, because this is likely maybe like a knot in a muscle, or kind of like an adhesion where the fascia isn't quite moving the way it needs to. So you can see that these different pieces can bind together, and they actually can form trunks of restriction. And if we kind of stop moving for long enough, or we're not doing this proper work for our body, these things can become thicker and thicker. And they're not meant to do that. They're actually meant to be these separate pieces, so that as you move, it also moves. It has this way of moving so that you're able to barely be able to function. So these trees of restriction are here, and we're getting ready to see one of these break into 2 pieces, right? And that's, I say break, but it's not really what happened. It's that they separated into 2, and that would feel really good in the body. That might be kind of a similar feeling as coming out of a stretch, and feeling that effect afterwards. But what's so cool that so often is kind of neglected in this fascia is that these are water tubules. So these pieces of fascia are actually hollow, and just like a hose, their water actually runs through. So the most amount of water moving through your body actually moves up and down the spinal cord in this same way. And so these little tubules are hollow, and they're conducting energy, they're conducting electricity and sound. But most importantly for us, because we're made of 80% water, they move the water. And so when we hydrate our tissues, this is actually what we're talking about, is that we start to take these trees or trunks of constriction, and separate them. And through that separation, they actually are becoming more solution-like versus more jelly-like. So these are actually fat cells here down in the bottom. And the way that your fascia kind of works with your capillaries is that, so say if you have a fight flight response in the body where you think maybe you're going to get into a fight or you're going to have an emergency, you can actually see here right now, you've got your capillary right here.
Blood coming.
And so in order for us to kind of fight or flee, which is our natural reaction to an emergency situation, well, one of the things we want to make sure is we don't bleed to death, right? In case we get cut, in case we get hurt. So what the fascia would actually do is clamp down on this blood vessel here and squeeze it just like a tourniquet and get that blood to be out of that, because that blood is closer to the surface. And we actually want to have our blood in that type of situation deep in our organs so that we can run, right? So that we can flee, whatever we're deciding that we're going to do. So your fascia actually helps to control your blood pressure. And through that, so many other things. So it literally has this role that it has throughout the entire system, not just with keeping you together and keeping you moving, but with allowing the blood flow to function properly, to have the right blood pressure. It is just like this absolutely amazing thing. And you can see here, there's actual drips of water moving along this. And this is in a real live tissue, right? This is magnified 25 times, which is about the same amount that you would see in a magnifying glass, but they can't think of a microscope.
Got it.
So
yeah.
You might look underneath a microscope and see cells. That's how deeply magnified that video is. And really kind of, this video was so instrumental in the way that we kind of understand this tissue, is that they've actually had to create new mathematic forms, and they've had to create new forms by which we think that this is the way things actually happen, because the models that they had before were blown out of the way because they could see that the model they showed wasn't the way it actually was. So we're going to see that there's myofascia and fascial research over the next 5 years. It's going to be this buzzword. It's going to be a household word. It's going to be something that even people who are not practicing yoga or kind of coming in and stretching, you're going to learn about this. It's going to be in the news. It's going to be big. And it's going to be really cool too, because we're going to learn so much about how our body really works when we really don't know so much. So yet.
Yeah. So I don't remember learning about that in anatomy and bio. And I was pre-med. We're talking like 20 years ago, but still that's, I never put so much emphasis on that. And so thank you for the lesson. I think it was beneficial to all of us, including me. All right, let's talk about fibroblasts. And is that next on our list?
Sure, that works.
Perfect.
So fibroblasts and fibroclasts, you actually have these types of cells for any part of your body that you have. So if we're talking about the bones, they would be osteoclasts and osteoblasts, right? Because they're bone cells. Your body is constantly rebuilding itself, right? It's constantly either building up or taking away. And your body responds to stress, right? Not all stress is bad stress, right? Yeah. Some stress we actually need, especially in women as they age. You need to stress your bones. You need to actually have weight impact on your bones so that the bones, so your body says, hey, I use that. I need to take care of that. And so instead of you breaking down the bones, which is exactly what happens in osteopenia and osteoporosis, you build up the bones. We build up that strength. So in the fascia, we have what we call fibroblasts and fibroclasts, right? So fibroclasts are what going to actually break down, and fibroblasts are what are going to actually build up. So in our body, we kind of have to assume that we get to a certain length and we don't really get taller, right? Otherwise, this whole kind of model wouldn't work. We don't keep getting taller and taller and taller, right? You'd be probably 50 feet tall by this point, right?
Yeah.
At some point, we stop growing, but the fascia doesn't. The fascia actually, while you sleep and while you repair, the fibroblasts come in and they actually lay down foundation. Just like if you had a little piece of spackling on your wall that needed a little work, you'd put a little spackling on there and put a little paint on and kind of just patch it up. Well, your body's doing that same process all the time. And it's actually laying down more fiber, right? More fascia. And because the body needs to stay at same size, it doesn't continue to lengthen. We have this thing in the body that's called contracture. And it's the body's assumption that fibroblasts and fibroclasts are doing their jobs. And so since they are laying down fascia, what we have to do is the body actually shortens. And so at night, when you go lay down, one of the things that happens is that you actually shrink a little bit.
Okay.
And that's why you kind of feel a little like tight in the morning, or maybe not full of energy. And as you watch any cat, right, they get up from a little nap
and they yawn and they
do a little stretching, they stretch their back, and they're actually melting that fuzz that's there. Because the body is constantly laying down that fascia. One of the things that it's doing is also shortening, because that's one of the things we need to make sure is that you don't just become 30 foot tall. You'd have to have, new wardrobe every week.
True. But you're right. That's a good to get a stretch. Now I'm going to feel taller it's a good tip for my son. We went to Disney this summer and he wasn't tall enough to ride like a lot of the rides. He's 4. So now I'm going to tell him stretch more in the morning, let alone I'll buy you thicker sneakers next time. But okay, good.
That's perfect.
Yes. All right. Thanks for explaining that. Do you have any visuals on that, or?
I don't have any visuals on that. Cause really, so many of these things that I've actually just found these visuals, in the last few years. And there are things that I wish that, I was, shared with when I learned this stuff, because when you can see it in this kind of format, you really get it. You're like, okay, I understand this. And it's really important that we practice something like yin yoga, because the body is doing this contracture. It is, as my teacher says, we're all drying up and dying, right? It's a little morbid, but we are, right? We start off very liquid-like, right? We were basically little sharks when we're babies. We're mostly cartilage. Our bones haven't completely ossified, and we're very liquid-like, right? And as we get older, especially in the 80s and 90s, we begin drying up more and more and more. And what we don't want to have is what we call fixation. So if contracture happens for long enough and we don't kind of take care of the body, fixation happens, which means that the cells have become, the tree trunks have become so solidified, and those tissues in that area have become kind of so dried up that they don't function anymore. So it's like you try to take your arm over your head, but that's all you get, right? Very common in women is to get it frozen shoulder. It doesn't always happen, but typically women, stop moving and then they can't move their arm. And so we've got to do something like yin yoga or something in this realm, deep tissue massage, Rolfing, Thai yoga, something to help break up those adhesions so that we don't get fixation, right? And if we continue with that fixation for long enough, we really can have this degeneration where the body actually starts to break down, right? And we see that as we age. We really need to decide that we're going to age gracefully, but we need to do that by actually having these self-care mechanisms in our body, in our weekly plan, where you got to put this stuff on your calendar, just as if you're going to an appointment that's really important, so that the body has this constant nurturing and this constant self-care. Because if we don't, we know what's happening, right? We feel it, right? We feel that I'm in more pain than I was yesterday. I can't quite bend over and touch my feet the way that I could when I was 5 years younger. And what I'm finding is that I actually, I have more range of motion and less pain in my body at 36 than I did at 18. I didn't know this at 18. I was working just as hard. I was really stressing my body at that age, but I didn't have this practice. And what's so cool about this practice is that it's kind of all encompassing. It's a systematic way of exploring the entire body, like kind of every little nook and cranny. And sometimes you realize, oh, I'm not so tight there. I feel pretty good. And then you get into an area and you're like,
whoa,
holy crap. Like I didn't even know this existed in my body. And yin is a way to kind of prevent those surprises that may later become dysfunctions, right? And we're all dysfunctional enough. We don't need to add to that.
I agree. And do you want to discuss a little bit? We have 3 minutes left about fuzz, and I have some other notes in front of me.
Yes. So the fuzz. So I think I kind of talked about it just a little bit.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was
that concept that when we sleep, that the fibroblasts are coming in and laying down fascia. But what's really cool is that the fascia, or the matrix that's laid down originally, is a very, very strong and very organized matrix, so that it's so strong that even given some pretty good, strong stress to it, it withholds. It really stands up to time. But the little pieces of fibers that are laid down every night while you sleep, AKA the fuzz, right? That fuzz occurs when you're sitting still for an hour or two, but 6 or 8 hours laying in the bed, right? You're definitely having this fuzz being created. And that's why you feel stiff in the morning, it's the fuzz.
Didn't know that
and
was
it's that same thing we talk about, is it's the little pieces sticking together, right? And that sticking together can later become, right, all of the things that we've been talking about. So what we want to do is every day we want to get the body moving. And to prevent that fuzz, we want to move the spine side to side. We want to twist the spine from side to side. We want to back bend, and we want to forward bend, right? And if we do those things and we do them often, right, we're going to be able to prevent things like bulging discs, herniated discs, right? And if you've ever had anything like that, it can be awfully painful. And the fascia that's actually it connects your different pieces of your spine, you're called your intervertebral disc. They actually have no blood supply of their own. So the only way you can actually take care of that tissue is through movement. So if you're not taking side bends and twists and all these different forms, then you can guarantee it's drying up faster than you are. And when those cells dry up in between your bones, then we can have tons of pain, right? Where we're just the quality of life is so low, but we can prevent those things. And if for some reason it's already happened, we can start to heal the body. We have this amazing ability to move our body in this way and provide healing at such a deep level.
And let's do our best to keep it that way. And thanks to you, we can.
So much easier, right, to prevent something than it is to come in and, what they say, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure, right? We want to, not get to the point where we actually have this disease or this dysfunction. We want to take care of it before that. And if you're practicing this regularly, you're going to do that. Right? You're really going to kind of take care of those things when they're really still on the periphery before they become a serious issue.
Great. Kerry, thank you so much for sharing this. I love the slides. I love the video. Would you mind telling our viewers and listeners how we can reach you directly?
Yes, you can always give us a call at 941-922-9642. And our website is always the best way to get more information or get a hold of us. And that's CircuSoul.com, CircuSoul.com.
Great. Thank you for your time today and for the lessons. Really, we appreciate it. Great job. Have a great day. And we'll talk next week.
And stay hydrated.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.